The first time Ethan Walker felt his heart stop, it wasn't because of the accident that almost killed him. It was because, as he lay half-conscious on a stretcher, drenched in rain and blood, he saw a blurry young woman leaning over him with eyes so determined, so unshaken by the chaos around them, that for a moment he forgot the pain tearing through his chest. Sirens screamed, paramedics shouted, and thunder cracked across the Oregon sky. But all he could focus on was the calmness in her voice as she ordered the team to keep pressure on his wound. There was something powerful, something steady about her presence, as if she were the only solid thing in a world collapsing around him. He didn't know her name. He didn't know if he would survive. All he knew was that the girl holding him together made his heart feel safe, even as it struggled to beat. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in moments that change lives forever, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like these reach more hearts. What Ethan didn't know then was that the woman who saved his life that stormy evening wasn't just a paramedic. Her name was Lena Hart, a young cardiothoracic surgery resident with a reputation for being brilliant, level-headed, and quietly compassionate. She had been on her drive home when she witnessed Ethan's motorcycle skid across the wet highway, the impact sending him tumbling like a rag doll. Without hesitation, she rushed to him, her medical instincts kicking in before she had time to process anything else. Lena had seen dozens of emergency situations, but something about the man lying on the asphalt, gasping for breath, awakened a fierce determination inside her. His eyes were full of panic, but also a silent plea, as if he had already accepted death too many times in his life. Ethan survived the night, but the physical damage to his heart was only part of the story. For years, he had carried emotional wounds far deeper than the scars on his body, years of blaming himself for his younger brother's death, years of self-destruction disguised as bravery, years of pushing people away because he believed he was cursed to lose anyone who cared for him. His life had become a pattern of reckless choices, dangerous jobs, and moments of numbness where he felt nothing except the wind against his face as he sped down empty highways. Lena became his attending resident during recovery, the universe weaving their paths together with a precision that felt impossible to ignore. At first, Ethan barely spoke. He watched the rain outside his hospital window for hours, letting his thoughts eat away at him. He didn't want to feel weak. He didn't want anyone to see how broken he truly was. But Lena had a way of gently unraveling his silence. She didn't force conversation. She simply sat beside him during late-night checkups, adjusting his writing notes, humming softly when she thought he was asleep. Ethan pretended not to listen, but her presence began to stitch together something inside him that had been falling apart for years. As weeks passed, Ethan noticed the quiet fire behind her steady professionalism. She carried a sadness of her own, buried beneath her determination. He overheard nurses whispering about how Lena had lost her father to a heart condition when she was just 15. It was what pushed her into medicine, what fueled her perfectionism, what made her so deeply protective of her patients' lives. She knew the pain of losing someone you weren't ready to say goodbye to, and she fought every day to make sure no one else had to feel it. Slowly, Ethan started opening up. One late evening, after a rough day of physical therapy, he finally told her about his brother Andrew. He described the guilt that haunted him after the accident, how he had been the one riding the ATV that flipped, how he survived, and Andrew didn't. Lena didn't interrupt. She didn't tell him to stop blaming himself. She simply placed a hand on his forearm, steady and warm, and told him that sometimes the hardest wounds to heal aren't the ones that show up on scans. Their connection grew with a tenderness neither expected. Lena started checking on him even when she wasn't assigned to his case. Ethan found himself looking forward to the sound of her footsteps in the hallway, to the way she brushed her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, to the spark in her eyes whenever he managed a small, stubborn smile. There was something incredibly comforting about her, a presence that felt like the first safe place he'd found in years. But love wasn't simple. Lena had strict boundaries. She wasn't allowed to form attachments beyond the professional, especially not with someone as vulnerable as Ethan. She feared crossing lines, feared being irresponsible, feared losing the respect he'd fought so hard to earn in a field dominated by older, more experienced surgeons. And Ethan feared being a burden, feared dragging her into the darkness he wasn't convinced he could escape yet. They danced around the feelings neither wanted to admit, both pretending they were stronger than the currents pulling them together. After 2 months, Ethan was discharged. The hospital doors closed behind him, and suddenly Lena wasn't beside him every day. She returned to the relentless pace of residency, stitching hearts back together while her own quietly ached. Ethan returned to an empty apartment, the walls far too quiet without her footsteps. He tried going back to his old habits, fast rides, late nights, shutting out the world, but none of it felt the same. His recklessness now felt like betrayal. Lena had fought for his life. He couldn't throw it away again. One evening, unable to shake the feeling that something was missing, he drove to the hospital, not recklessly, but with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. He saw Lena in the cafe, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. She looked so human, so fragile beneath her polished exterior. Ethan hesitated, unsure if he had the right to approach her, but when she glanced up and saw him, her eyes softened in a way that made his heart stutter for reasons unrelated to his surgery. They talked, awkwardly at first, then with growing ease. Lena admitted she had worried about him more than she should have. Ethan admitted he had been trying to change because of her. It wasn't a confession of love, but it was enough to shift something between them. From that night on, they began meeting in quiet corners of the city, always careful, always cautious, but undeniably drawn to one another. They both knew the boundary between them existed, but they also knew some connections weren't meant to be ignored. As months passed, Ethan's life transformed. He went into therapy, started volunteering at a youth center, and replaced his dangerous habits with healthier ones. Every small victory brought him closer to a version of himself he never believed he could be. Lena watched him grow with pride, her admiration deepening with every story he shared, every scar he allowed her to see. But just when things seemed to settle, fate tested them again. During a routine checkup, doctors discovered that Ethan's heart hadn't healed as well as expected. He needed a complex surgery, one that came with significant risks. And Lena, because of her role, because of her experience, because of the trust Ethan placed in her, was assigned to the surgical team. The night before the operation, Ethan sat alone in his hospital room, staring out at the dark horizon, fear gnawing at him. He wasn't afraid of the pain. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of leaving things unsaid. Lena entered quietly, her expression tense, her gaze holding emotions she could no longer hide. She told him she shouldn't be there. He told her he didn't want anyone else to operate on him. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, two hearts beating with too much to lose. The surgery was long, complicated, demanding. Lena's hands never trembled, but her heart pounded with an intensity she had never felt in the OR before. Every stitch felt personal. Every decision felt like a battle. Hours later, when Ethan's heart finally stabilized, she had to step away to breathe, her entire body shaking with relief. She didn't care who saw. She didn't care what anyone thought. All she cared about was that he lived. Ethan woke up the next morning groggy, sore, but alive. When Lena entered his room, her eyes were red from exhaustion. He smiled weakly and whispered that she had saved him, again. She didn't correct him. She simply sat beside him, taking his hand in hers, no longer hiding the emotions that had become impossible to deny. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that healing, both emotional and physical, is possible. As Ethan grew stronger over the weeks that followed, their bond deepened into something undeniable. They spent long afternoons in the healing garden outside the hospital, talking about life, forgiveness, purpose. Ethan told her how she had fixed more than his heart. She had helped him rebuild the parts of himself he believed were beyond repair. Lena told him that he had reminded her why she chose this path in the first place, that healing wasn't just science, but connection, courage, and trust. They were two people who met in catastrophe, yet rebuilt each other with gentleness. Two broken hearts learning to beat again, not perfectly, not without scars, but with strength they never knew they possessed. Before you hear the final lines, I have a special request. Please comment below. Do you believe that some people enter our lives exactly when we need them most? I would love to know your thoughts. By the end of that year, Ethan and Lena stood on the same bridge where his accident happened, a place once associated with pain now, transformed into a symbol of second chances. The sky was clear, the wind soft, and Ethan, healthier than he had ever been, took her hand with gratitude in his eyes. They didn't need grand declarations, didn't need perfect words. Their story wasn't about flawless romance. It was about healing, resilience, and the extraordinary power of a connection that saves a life in more ways than one. He fell for the girl who fixed his heart, not just in the operating room, but in the quiet moments, the broken moments, the moments when love chooses us before we even realize we're worthy of it. And together they walked forward, hearts stronger, futures brighter, and a promise between them that some miracles are made not of magic, but of people who refuse to give up on you.